Greetings all, FerrariMan601 here. Welcome back to another 1/200 scale diecast model aircraft review of this, in this 2023 release from Gemini Jets, the Boeing VC-25. I did a review of the 1/400 scale model by Gemini Jets of the VC-25. I published that in October 2023. Today, we're going to take a look at exactly the same airplane, VC-25 tail number 28,000, but twice the size. Same manufacturer, same aircraft, should be pretty much the same model, but when you're able to increase the size by a factor of 2, you're dealing with a very different animal. Therefore, we're going to be taking a look at this absolutely wonderful 1/200 scale model by Gemini Jets. What we're not going to do at any great length or in any great detail today is talk about the Boeing 747-200 or the VC-25 in terms of its history, its role, and its technical detail or specification. If you do want some information about that kind of thing, please do take a look at the link in the description to my October 2023 review of the 1/400 scale version of this airplane. Today, we're really just dedicating ourselves to the box and what the box looks like, as well as this wonderful model, what it looks like, the details that you see on it, the details that are similar to the 1/400, the details that are different to the 1/400, and generally how you can interface, interact, and configure this airplane, because it is that 1/200 scale, so you've got a few different features on it that you do not have on most 1/400 scale diecast models, particularly here by Gemini Jets. So sit back, relax, and let's take a look together at the Boeing VC-25, colloquially known as Air Force One, here rendered by Gemini Jets in glorious 1/200 scale. Before we take a closer look at this tremendous, in every sense of the word, model, we must at least attempt to take a look at the box in which it comes. So, if we can break the fourth wall and get the giant hand into position and lift the airplane out of our display box here, the light box, and bring in the storage box, yeah, that's what we've got going on here. It doesn't fit quite inside the light box, as you can see. However, we can kind of make do with what we have here. Regardless, Gemini 200 25th anniversary, 1998 to 2023. Well, 25 years of Gemini Jets, that's pretty cool. United States of America, title graphics across the center front of the box with the presidential seal, and then rendering of the aircraft itself, tail number 28,000, Boeing VC-25, as you can see. And then the bottom of the box, we have 1/200 scale diecast model aircraft. And then the item number, for those of you keeping score, is G2AFO1204. So there is your item number in all of its resplendence. So that's the front panel of the box. There is no look inside tab on this one. This is something that you will almost always see on 1/400 scale models from Gemini Jets, but not here on the VC-25. I have seen it on other 1/200 Gemini Jets boxes, but not on this particular one. I don't know if that's something that they have since discontinued, or if they just didn't do it for this one. However, we have got our right side panel here at very close range. This gives us, best way we can maneuver this, Gemini 200, 1/200 scale diecast model with our item number reiterated, and then rendering of the aircraft once again here, much smaller than it is on the front panel. Boeing VC-25 trademark. Top panel of the box, here we go, Gemini 200 logo once again. Adult collectible model, warning contains small parts, not suitable for children under 14 years of age. Barcode and item number there visible. Left side panel, basically the same as the right side panel. Scale diecast model on 1/200, all of that stuff. This is the maximum zoom out that I can actually do, so this is what we have to contend with, given my setup in the light box right now. Bottom panel of the box, Gemini 200 right there. Back of the box, here we go. This is a little bit more in keeping with what you'll see with 1/400s, for example. However, if we tilt up, you can see Gemini 200, as real as it gets, trademark. Gemini Jets brings you the highest quality precision die-cast model airliners in highly collectible limited editions with officially licensed markings. Registration mark packaging is personalized to each aircraft to enhance its collectible value. And then, of course, your selling points for Gemini Jets. Your trade and dress regulation stuff for Boeing VC-25. Both are produced under license and are copyright of the Boeing Management Company. New aircraft being added monthly. Visit our website or follow us on social media for latest releases. And then, of course, your Gemini Jets corporate and social media website links. Made in China with the recycle symbol. And here we go. The tattletale of when this actually was produced. Copyright 2023, Gemini Jets, Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. So that tells you that this is indeed a 2023 release. And that's what you've got for the box. The inside of the box, it is another foam sarcophagus with a number of wells in there for accommodating the airplane, the landing gear well blanking panels, which are intended to emulate the landing gear doors and things of that nature. However, as we get the airplane back here on the turntable, where it ought to be, we can see the wonderful proportions of everything. So all of that you see in here fits inside the box, plus a little bit more. There are also a couple of tools that they give you that I'm sure we'll get into for removing the closed landing gear doors if you want to display the airplane in an in-flight configuration. However, that's what you get on the 1/200 scale Gemini Jets box. Pretty standard, but again, no look inside tab, which is not something you'll always see on a 1/200 from Gemini, but you will almost always see it on the 1/400. So, little bit of a difference there. So, what is this airplane and what is this model? I seriously doubt that any of you watching beyond this point have any doubt whatsoever as to what this airplane is. It is the Boeing VC-25. It is based very heavily upon the Boeing 747-200B. It is the official transport for the President of the United States. And again, I do urge all of you to follow that link in the description to see my full review of the 1/400 scale version of this aircraft. Exactly the same aircraft, tail number 28,000, also a 2023 Gemini Jets release. So, for more specifications and even some speculation as to what the airplane actually is capable of and what some of its features may be, I do urge you to take a look at that video. We're more so concerned with the model itself today. What is this? Well, as Gemini Jets are famous for doing in both their 1/400 and 1/200 scale models, this is pretty much 100% die cast. So this thing is well built and it is heavy. I have actually weighed it. It is 2 pounds, 1.4 ounces. So no, it's not particularly heavy. You're certainly not going to have any trouble maneuvering the thing. However, it is very heavy for something that is meant to be a static display piece, such as a die-cast model. So you know that there is a lot of weight just in metal in this product, so you can get a sense of the overall quality and quality control, really, it must be said, that go into producing these 1/200 scales, and this one is absolutely no exception. What you will see macrocosmically here is die-cast metal construction throughout. The only plastic parts on the model are the landing gear, which are a composite metal, plastic, and rubber. We do have rubber tires. You will also see plastic components on the wings. You have the engine nacelles, which are in plastic, and you also have the fan blade detail inside the engines, also in plastic. Otherwise, there are a few accent parts that are also plastic. The antennas across the top and the ventral side of the fuselage are plastic. The add-on separately applied antennas that you can see there. However, beyond that, everything else on the airplane is die-cast. The refueling receptacle hatch is also plastic. But beyond that, it is a solid hunk of metal, and it certainly feels like it in the hand, and, well, the scale does not lie. It is weighty, it is a little bit chunky, but it's a 747, so of course you would expect it to be on the weightier side and on the larger side, even in 1/200 scale. Not to say even that the 1/400 is particularly light. Again, die-cast construction through and through on those as well. So that's what you're going to get here in terms of the quality and overall nature of construction. What else are you going to see, though? Beyond the feel that it has in the hand, the feel that it has to the eye is also quite remarkable. You have a lot of detail on this model. And really, I've got to say that it's pretty impressive to see the details that are present here, which are also present on the 1400 version. Of course, with this being 2 times larger, literally in the mathematical sense, than the 1400, you are going to have a little bit more latitude and a little bit more physical space to emulate some of the smaller details that are omitted on the 1400 simply because of size factors that you've got to think about when producing these things. But here on the 1200, you have all of the detail that is apparent on the 1400 and then some. So you're not losing anything by going up 2 times in size. You only stand to gain. The features that were on the 1400 that are still evident here, quite obviously, the livery. It is very nicely done. The colors look good. The placement of things like the title graphics and other tampo-printed details like the American flag on the vertical stabilizer, the U.S. Air Force roundel in the tail cone, other accent markings that are trying to emulate hatches, doors, air data probes, static ports, things of that nature. They're all still there, and they're all still in the correct places. Also, other elements that we talked about on the 1400 review, you've got the double cheat line, the gold band and the white band underneath, and then the bottom of the fuselage, the aft section is done in that brushed aluminum chrome finish, which looks very good, even looks better on this one. You have also got the lighter blue, almost robin's egg blue colors of the forward fuselage, and the engine nacelles, very nicely done. So everything that you saw on the 1400 is also here. Details that are added here on the 1200. You have got even more topside dorsal antennas on this aircraft. You had 13 of them on the 1400 version. On this one, by I am counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. One more add-on 3D antenna on the dorsal side of the fuselage than you had on the 1400. And on the ventral side, we have got 1, 2, 3, 4 antennas proper, and then we also got a couple other ancillary things here. For example, in the tail cone, we have got 2 little silver protrusions, port and starboard of centerline in the aft fuselage. That looks good as well. Those are 2 little details that are omitted on the 1400 simply because, well, size requirements. Those get small, especially considering that they're already rather small details here in 1200. But be that as it may, everything else that you saw on the 1400 is also here on the 1200, right down to shut lines for control surfaces and flaps and slats and spoilers, anything you could imagine in terms of wanting to emulate in terms of flight controls. That's also here. One more detail, though, that you will get on this scale versus the 1400, inside the engines, the engine fan blade detail. They are much more refined here on the 1200, as you might expect. However, they do not rotate. And this is something that appears to be a hit or miss feature on Gemini Jets in 1/200 scale. Some of them do have rotating fan blades and some of them do not. This is one of the models that apparently does not have rotating engine fan blades. Is it really that important? I don't believe so. However, there may be some of you who look at a feature like that and say, well, if it doesn't have it, I don't want any. And that is your prerogative. Me, I don't particularly mind. However, if that is going to bother you, just be aware that that is something that this particular model does in fact lack. Now, stopping our rotation so we can start to get a closer look at some of the many details that are here evident. We'll start to zoom in on the forward section of fuselage, and there we go. So, again, proportionally, very similar in terms of what is filling our visual field as we saw in the 1400 version. Just here, things are twice the size, there's twice the space, and twice the opportunity really to define and refine some detail a little bit more, given the form factor here, and they've taken full advantage of that. Again, all the detail that you can see on the 1400 version still here, but done that much better. I'll show you what I mean. For example, we talked about air data ports and things like that on the 1400 VC-25. Well, we've got some air data sensors and air data probes and pitot tubes right here as well. But you can actually identify them a little bit more clearly here. Obviously, these are either pitot tubes or angle of attack sensors. And again, it's a little bit difficult to define which is which. I would say that they're pitot tubes by the general shape of them, but they could be AOA sensors for all I know. Either way, clearly you can identify those two components as one of those two things. Additionally, you have got more static port detail here. Not entirely sure what this would be, but you've got two little openings right there for instrumentation on the side of the nose just below the passenger deck. Really, really cool. Immediately aft, what have we got? We have got our R1 door. Obviously, that is a little bit hard to see against the blue paint in the upper area of it, but it's there. The shut line printed there. Also, hinges as well as the latch armature, the handle that you could open up to open the door, obviously. Below that, and slightly aft, we have got the presidential seal, 100% legible, as it even was in the 1400 version, but obviously this one being twice the size, it is even crisper and clearer to read. And immediately aft thereof, we have got our main forward cargo door right there. Again, tampo printed detail with the shut line showing where the panel gap is between the door and the static portion of the fuselage, and all of that is integrated nicely with this livery line, this chrome area in the forward section of the fuselage. Very, very nicely done. Moving down a little bit more, we have got our nose landing gear. Landing gear here, they do not retract, but they are removable and replaceable with closed landing gear door blanking panels that we'll show you later on. But there is your nose gear with its strut. We have got runway turn-off lights, or part of the landing lights, not entirely sure which is which on this airplane, but two of them right there as separately applied, highly reflective details, and the nose wheel is, believe it or not, steerable. So you can push this thing around on its wheels. They all roll, of course, on rubber tires, very nice. And you can get a sense of how the airplane actually would steer on the ground. Very, very good. As we continue to move aft, there's our wing root and wing spar area. Landing light fairings here, very similar to how they looked on the 1400, but again, just bigger and a little bit more well-defined on this version. And as we start to move outboard along the leading edge of the wing, we have our pylons and nacelles for the starboard engines coming into view. Pylons are metal. The engine nacelles themselves and all the other engine detail are plastic, but very nice. You can just see a little bit of that fan blade detail that we'll take a closer look at later on in plastic, but looks very good. The anti-icing ring along the intake side of the engine as well looks very, very good here. Outboard starboard engine, obviously very similar in its proportion. And then we have our wing tip, replete with our green strobe, and we have got one of our static discharge and communication antennas there across the wingtip. Very cool. Moving up. Rear section of the fuselage, getting our window line back into view, and some of our topside antennas as we move toward the aft portion of the tail cone and the empennage. Very cool. Vertical stabilizer with our tail number, 28,000 visible, Air Force roundel, American flag with 50 stars and 13 stripes as you would expect. And you can start to see a little bit of printed and separately applied 3D detail in the tail cone as well, associated with the auxiliary power unit. You can also see along the wingtips of the horizontal stabilizer, we do have, a little bit difficult to see because of the angle here, but we do have another separately applied antenna on that wingtip. The ones on the main wings are facing aft, the ones on the empennage are facing forward, interestingly enough. However, that's what we've got from this view, and everything so far looks exactly as it should, and it looks absolutely impressive. Taking a better look now, starboard, 90 degrees on, so we can get a little bit better sense of how things actually line up in relation to each other. Again, moving toward the forward area of the fuselage, there is our nose, the hump over the forward fuselage, the trademark feature of the 747. Nose gear, strut, and wheel looks good. You can also see the cockpit windows there giving us a little bit of side eye, and the nose there distinguishable from other variants of the 747 because we have got that refueling receptacle, the hatch there, just creating a little bit of a blister in the otherwise uninterrupted smooth curvature up toward the cockpit windows. Very cool. Cabin windows, obviously, forward section of the fuselage. Some windows are shaded over, but we have got, looks to be 5 of them that are opened up extreme forward in the fuselage. Also, shut line visible between the fuselage proper and the fairing for the radome. Looks good. Beyond that, presidential seal just forward of the starboard forward cargo door. Looks good. Can we focus on that? Are we just ever so slightly too close? Maybe a little bit of a zoom out, if we can focus on that. You're probably going to be able to read the presidential seal right there. I can't on this very small screen. However, I'm going to say it's legible because, well, I know it's legible because I've taken a closer look off camera, but very, very good. Moving aft, obviously, United States of America title graphics, and you can see that we've got very crisp printing for our cheat lines across the livery. We've got blue, gold, and white from top to bottom, and we've got door detail, window detail, window shade detail, all kinds of wonderful things on the upper and lower decks. Looks good. Obviously, we've got our R1 and R2 doors visible here. Door R3 is an overwing door that's being obscured a little bit by the starboard wing itself. As we move up a little bit and be able to see that. There we go, slightly. You see about half of it. R4 is going to be entirely obscured by the outboard side of the wing. However, as we move aft toward the tail cone, we get into the unpainted chrome area of the fuselage, with our cargo door visible there, our main cargo door, and then there's a hatch aft of that. Looks very good. And then we have got our R4 and R5 door here in the tail cone. Very cool. These two little details right here, these are not evident on the 1400 version. I believe that they're just printed on the underside of that particular model, but they are separately applied here. Not entirely sure what they are. They could be associated with lavatory servicing, or they could be associated with perhaps some of the countermeasures that this airplane most likely carries. I don't know. They could well be something that's a standard fit on other 747-200s. I just don't know what they are, but they are evident here and separately applied. Looks good. Empennage, tail cone, vertical and horizontal stabilizers, looks good. 28,000. American flag. And then, of course, now a little bit better, you can see that the antennas that face forward off the wingtips of the horizontal stabilizers, they are facing forward and they are separately applied. Looks very, very good. Perhaps in the tail cone you could see that we have got a little bit of three-dimensional activity going on in terms of APU exhausts and marker lights, but we're going to get a better view of all of those things in due course, so let not your hearts be troubled. We will be able to see those in just a moment. Now aft view on VC-25 in 1/200. There we go. Let's start to zoom in a little bit so you can get an overall sense of the proportion here. First of all, of the empennage, everything absolutely laser straight in terms of vertical and horizontal stabilizers. Nothing appears crooked, and everything looks good in terms of relative slip angles and angles of attack. In terms of talking about the horizontal stabilizer, vertical stabilizer, we are absolutely straight and level in terms of our rudder input. Looks good. Also here you can see the underside of the fuselage. That all looks very, very nice. Those two little separately applied details visible here, just port and starboard of center line. Looks good. And the main landing gear also here visible. Again, these are removable and they are all 100% articulated in terms of being able to tilt, as well as they all roll as you would expect. Very cool. Moving outboard here, the trailing edges of the wings, you can see the fairings that cover up the flap armature, the proverbial canoes, they look good. And you can see through the exhaust sides of the engines. Visible bypass plainly evident in terms of what these engines are. Obviously on the newer variants of the 747, particularly the Dash 8, these engines would be even larger, at least the nacelles would be, which would yield even higher bypass. However, here, visible bypass is still evident. You can see even the gaps between the fan blades there on the compressor side of the engine. Very, very cool. Exhaust cone and the center core of the engine also modeled very nicely. There are no blades modeled in there, but the exhaust cone is a separately applied element and it looks good. Trailing edge of the wing tip, we've got aft-facing antennas on the extreme wing tip. Not quite evident from this angle, but it looks good. And the overall angle of the wings themselves, they look very nice. There is a bit of uplift as you would expect, and it all looks very, very good. Now, the center portion of the fuselage, the tail cone where the APU exhaust is, there we are with that. What do we see? Well, we see, similarly to the 1400, we have ourselves twin exhaust pipes for the auxiliary power unit. I don't know if that is something that you would see on all variants of the 747-200, or if that is something specific to the needs of Air Force One in terms of maybe needing a slightly larger APU to power some of the other systems that this airplane has that other 747-200s don't. Whatever the case, obviously 2 exhaust outlets for the APU. That looks very good. Just above that, we have got a marker and strobe light contained in a fairing. Obviously, that is our aftmost light that you would need per FAA and basically everybody else's regulations in terms of an airplane in flight. Below that, you also have another marker light. Very, very cool. These details, apart from the twin APU exhausts, are kind of missing from the 1400 version. The 1400 does have the twin APU exhaust pipes, but the marker light and the strobe light details here are printed rather than separately applied. Again, if you've got a form factor that's twice the size of the other one, you have a little bit more latitude for applying separate application parts rather than just having to make do with emulating it as best you can via tampo printing. Again, not to say that tampo printing is at all inadequate, and particularly when we're talking about models in the 1400 scale form factor. But here in 1200, if you can at all afford to make them separately applied details, you probably should, because it really pays off. It makes this airplane truly look like it is a miniature version of the real thing. I'm half expecting that APU to fire up at any moment. Very cool. Now, port side of the 1200 VC-25. Basically, all of the same details as you would expect that we saw on the starboard side will be mirrored here and reiterated here on the port side, with a couple of exceptions. We do not have the 2 large lower deck cargo hatches on the port side that we do have on the starboard side. Apart from that, almost everything else that we saw on the other side will be here evident. Couple of exceptions. We have got, obviously, our L1 door, which is probably the most famous door on any airplane ever, because that's where the air stairs come up for the president to either ingress or egress the airplane, and of course the assembled press will be taking his picture and nowadays broadcasting everything across the internet. However, you also have this lower deck door right there just aft of the presidential seal here on the port side. This is an auxiliary boarding door, and we have seen in recent weeks we do have the president on occasion using this door, which has an integral air stair for ingress or egress, simply because it's a little bit of a shorter climb up into the airplane. Both are equally valid, both are used. Very cool. Apart from the L1 door, moving aft, we have got our L2 door just above that chrome swoop line in the livery. Looks good. Also here we have got 2 additional static ports in that chrome area that we did not have on the starboard side. Looks good. Apart from that, everything else that we're about to see is going to be pretty much identical to the starboard side. Our wing root and wing spar area with our landing light fairings, pylon supporting the port side engines, looks good. Again, both of those nacelles in plastic, including the exhaust cones, which are very nicely painted in that brushed aluminum finish. Looks very, very nice. Something else, though, that the larger form factor of a 1200 allowed Gemini Jets to do on this one versus the 1400 is, you see right here, we've just got some more detail on the outboard side of the pylon here for number 1 engine. And again, it doesn't add much in terms of, hey, that looks really cool, but it adds enough to be able to say, huh, that really does look really authentic. And it's something that, for the most part, is missing on the 1400 version, simply because these are very small details in 1200 scale. In 1400 scale, they would be barely visible, if visible at all. So, yes, you understand where they make the decisions to include or not to include a given detail. But I've got to say, I love it. Out of sight, we have got our L3 and L4 doors. However, we do have an aft cargo door in the lower deck right there. Very similar to the forward door, a little bit more narrow. I don't know if this door has an integral air stair, but I do know that this door has been used on occasion to load and unload cargo, as well as to load and unload, well, gotta say, this airplane does play funeral duty from time to time. The caskets carrying the bodies of former presidents, if they had wished for a state funeral, often are loaded and unloaded through this door, if not one of the main entry and exit doors on the main deck. But I've seen it used for that purpose as well, or for supporting equipment in order to enable the transfer of the casket. So interesting to see that detail as well. Moving aft, the tail cone, we start to flare upward, looks good. Air Force roundel, evident, and then we get into the empennage once again. Here the American flag shown in an orientation a little bit more familiar to most people, but again, 50 stars and 13 stripes in alternating red and white. Looks very, very good. 28,000 the tail number, shut lines there for the rudder control surface, plainly evident, and separately applied detail there for the forward-facing antennas on the wingtips for the empennage. Looks cool. Just aft or inboard of where you can see the antenna, you can see that we have got this little tampo printed square. Quite sure that that is either trying to emulate an intake or a service hatch for the auxiliary power unit. Looks very, very good. Whatever it is, absolutely looks very authentic. Real cool stuff all over this airplane. Cannot fault it for anything. Now to take a look at the airplane here from nose on, and here's where I think the proportion of everything truly comes to fruition, because this looks so good right here. It really does. I'm just going to straighten out the nose wheel a little bit so it looks a little bit better. So all the wheels now facing exactly the same direction. That looks so good. This airplane looks like it's there on the stand awaiting orders. Looks fantastic. You can see here from the intake sides of the engines, you can see through to the backdrop. There is daylight coming through. Looks excellent, and again, everything looks good. Everything looks very symmetrical here from one side to the other. No issues with that. Again, we saw the geometry of the wings in terms of leading and trailing edges as well as uplift. Things look great. Nothing looks twisted. Angles of attack look good, and all things like that. Absolutely wonderful. Also, we're slightly off-center here in terms of our position relative to the nose and the empennage, but we can see the proportion there with the nose and the empennage. Things look straight. Things look absolutely proportionate. No issues with any of that. If we move down a little bit, you can start to see landing gear detail, landing gear doors. You can see some of the forward landing gear doors. Those only open when the gear is in transit, either extending or retracting. So that's not an issue to see that as a tampo printed detail, because those doors would not be open when the airplane is on the ground under normal conditions. So that's fine. Beyond that, just moving up the nose structure, the robin's egg blue underside of the airplane, and then the cheat lines, the white and the gold, they come together nicely. The radome with its shut line around the main portion of the fuselage as well as these ridges looks good. Refueling receptacle looks straight, and then the cockpit windows as well. They look very good from this angle. Really, this is tremendous stuff, I've got to say. Get a little bit of a closer look at the intake sides of the engines. Wonderful stuff. Again, you can see that they are bypassing visually. Looks good. They do not rotate, unfortunately, but again, I don't think that's a big deal. Looking excellent. You can also see the wing there, underside of the wing, the leading edge slats on the 747. They unfold in a forward direction. They are hinged along the leading edge of the wing so that when they are deployed, they unfold from underneath the wing toward the front side of the wing. Looks good. You can see the shut lines for all of that. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful stuff. No complaints whatsoever about anything that we're seeing from this 1/200 scale model. It looks absolutely tremendous stuff. Now we have jogged the airplane back over to our 3/4 forward view once again, because there are a couple other tricks that this can do, being a 1/200. We can remove the landing gear and we can replace it with closed landing gear doors. And in order to do that, we have got to entirely break the fourth wall and pick the thing up. So here we go, picking it up, and you can see our landing gear here. They are all magnetically secured to the airplane, so we just pull and then they start to come off. The mains, we have distinct inboard and outboard gear. They are location specific, so do note that. And then with the gear out, the airplane now sits on its belly. You're not going to hurt anything by keeping the airplane sitting on its belly like that. It is resting pretty much entirely on the inboard engine nacelle, so just be aware of that. That's not meant to be load-bearing, so don't keep it like this for a very long time. Obviously, when you store it in the box, it's in a foam cradle, and that's going to distribute the load a little bit more. I do think you would, over time, see deformation in the inboard engine nacelles if you did store the airplane like this, but for the amount of time that it takes to convert this from on the ground to in flight, this is not going to be much of a problem. Landing gear, though, this is one of the outboard gear. Looks very, very good. You can see that the gear is free to pivot fore to aft, and the wheels do roll as well. One of the inboard gear, also free to pivot fore to aft, and the gear roll. We have got ourselves a magnetic clasp, and then the nose gear. As you saw, the nose gear is able to steer. It only steers about 45 degrees. It does not just swivel 360 degrees, but it does steer as well as roll, as you might expect. So that is some cool stuff. Now we'll get the airplane configured for an in-flight configuration. Right, so we have got our blanking panels for the landing gear. This is going to be for inboard gear. This is going to be for outboard gear. And this is going to be for the nose gear. Very tiny. I know that it's not easy to see, but they will install as you would expect, just like the actual landing gear will. Underneath the airplane, you will be able to see that we have got just empty wells where the landing gear or the blanking door panels will go. As you can see, they are just going to install, as you would expect. These are going to be location and orientation specific. So there we go, that's how that's going to go. We have got one of the centerline inboard gear, which is going to go like so. We've got this one. Right. As you can see, it's a little finicky to do because small parts, even though this is a large model airplane, it's still a model airplane. It tucks underneath the center line of the fuselage, and equal and opposite on the starboard side. If we can get that in there. Trying our best. Not always easy. Starboard side panel does not really want to sit flush. For whatever reason. I don't believe that I'm doing anything wrong. Could just be the way that it is. As you can tell, it's finicky. To be fair to the model, I will swap positions on these. See if there is some reason why that would not be the case in terms of them being interchangeable. They're not. No, they are not interchangeable. They are location specific. And one works with no problem, and the other, for one reason or another, does not really want to sit flush, although that's better that time. So, okay, I'll take it. It's a little finicky. For the record, that's the first time I have ever installed them on this airplane, so perhaps once I get better at that, it's going to be a little bit quicker to do that process. However, that's what it is. And now the piece of resistance. Of course, a 1/200 scale model comes with a display stand. So with the airplane now in an in-flight configuration, with our blanking panels for the closed doors installed, we can line up the stand with the hole in the underside of the airplane. Give it a little bit of a wiggle to have it sit securely. And there it is. We bring you up so we can actually see. There we are. So there she is in flight. Obviously things are going to look very similar to how they looked with the airplane on the ground, but you can see now we have got the landing gear doors installed, so there are no obvious holes where things should be. Everything looks very clear and clean on the underside of the fuselage, as you would expect for this airplane to look in flight. And if I were any good with digital manipulation in terms of trying to make things look like things that they're not, against a neutral backdrop like this, you might even be able to have the airplane against a blue sky with cumulus clouds and really make it look like it's in flight. But for what I can do here and for what I want to do and just showing you the model how it is, it's going to look absolutely wonderful, and it does look absolutely wonderful as it is right here. While we've got the airplane in its in-flight configuration, let's take a closer look at some of the details that we perhaps didn't see earlier. Starting here, forward end of the fuselage looks absolutely wonderful. The little bit of discontinuity you can see is the nose gear door, which is installed correctly, but it just seems to want to sit like this. And thankfully it does, because in order to remove these things, you have these little plastic pick tools, which they do provide you. They give you 2 of them, because if you lose this, it could be disastrous. But you want a little bit of a gap in there so you could get the tool in and get some leverage behind it. So again, sacrificing a little bit of true authenticity for just ease of use, and I appreciate that, and I can absolutely forgive that, because if there's going to be a visual defect like that, at least give it purpose, and they have, so I can excuse that. However, on the forward end of the fuselage, a little bit more detail here around the refueling receptacle, as well as we have got some lights there, probably to help a boom operator from a KC-10 or KC-135, and we've got some anti-ice misters as well as windscreen wipers. Over top of the cockpit area, we have got an emergency escape hatch where the cockpit crew could escape via a ladder or escape rope that they throw over the side. That looks good. And then here on top, we have got our foremost antenna, or forwardmost antenna, as well as an overtop beacon light. This is a separately applied element. It is one of those artificial ruby type things. Very reflective and very nicely done. Antennas across the dorsal side of the fuselage. We've got a few dish antennas. We have got a few spike antennas. Very nice indeed. Empennage with our separately applied antennas facing forward on the horizontal stabilizer, vertical stabilizer looking good, and then main wings here. Obviously engine nacelles on the starboard wing, USAF initials there. You can also see the shut lines for the flaps and the speed brakes, spoilers, leading edge slats, and de-icing band there. And then the port side, leading edge of the wing, pylons and nacelles, Air Force roundel here, and then shut line for our spoilers, our flaperons, and the flaps proper. Looks good. Some stuff here, which is just a little bit of dust. No defects in the paint there. Looks good. There is lower side of the fuselage with the presidential seal. Air data ports there, looking very nice. And looking at the underside, NACA duct intakes, antennas underneath, and we've got another one of those separately applied rubies for the beacon light. And the belly of the airplane, landing gear doors closed, and then moving to the tail cone. Looks absolutely wonderful here. Taking a look from a front starboard quarter, very similar view here on the forward section of the fuselage. A detail that I didn't note, but you probably saw earlier, we have got an upper deck door, just as we had on the 1400 version, so that looks very good. Otherwise, all the detail here, with the exception of this forward lower deck cargo door, details that we just saw on the port side. One little thing here that may or may not be an aberration in the paint. This is a yellow, roughly square area. I don't know if that is trying to emulate a detail or if that is a little bit of overpaint, most likely from the gold cheat line. Whatever it is, I can see it. I know it's there. Does it detract much? Not really, but it's there, and I'm going to note it. I don't know if that's a detail that's meant to be there or if it is an error, but either way, it's there, and I don't particularly mind it. Regardless, all the same details that we saw on the wing in terms of leading edge, nacelles, things like that we saw on the port side, evident here on the starboard side. We've got our intake size of the engines with the fan blade detail, looking excellent as you would expect. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Wingtip, green strobe, antenna, looks good. And then moving back inboard toward the fuselage, wonderful details here.
United States of America title graphics. No smudging, no smearing, everything is clear. Air Force roundel once again, and then vertical stabilizer. Looks good. Looks so very, very good. No complaints whatsoever about this one, except for that one little half smudge. Otherwise, perfect model. Absolutely.
So there it was, in tremendous, literally, 1/200 scale by Gemini Jets. The Boeing 747-200B, otherwise known as the VC-25, otherwise known as Air Force One. This one, tail number 28,000. Again, I took a look at this very same airplane in 1/400 scale back in October 2023, so if you do want to get a better feel for what the airplane actually is, its history, its design, its specification, and its role in transporting the President of the United States, do take a look at that review. However, for what we have seen here today in surveying this model for what it is a really impressive piece. First of all, it's pretty big and it's pretty heavy, as you would expect for a basically 100% through and through die-cast metal model of the Boeing 747. It weighs over 2 pounds. It's pretty large dimensionally. You can do the math and figure out the dimensions on this one if you just remember to divide by a factor of 200 relative to the real-world dimensions on the 747. So, yeah, it looks the part and it feels the part. As we saw looking through the features and just visually evident detail on this model, it is truly a work of art. And because it's larger than the 1/400s that we much more frequently survey on the channel, you've got a few more features, a few more ways that you can interact with it, a few more ways that you can display it and configure it, whether you want to show it on the ground, in low-level flight, as you see right now with the landing gear extended, or, as you're about to see in a moment, in cruise, with the landing gear retracted, in this case removed, and blanking panels, which are emulating the closed landing gear doors, in their places. It looks really, really good no matter how you want to display this airplane, whether resting its own weight on its own gear on the ground, or if you want to have it on the included display stand looking like it is racing the heavens. It is an absolutely beautiful piece. Of course, the subject matter for this airplane as well. Who doesn't know what Air Force One is, and who doesn't think that this airplane and this livery on this airplane is something that is so very visually appealing? Very small minority probably disagrees with that statement. However, it is Air Force One. It is one of the most famous aircraft in the world, and I have to say it is most definitely the most famous 747. The 747 itself, an incredibly famous airplane. It was the first jumbo jet, and here, a Boeing 747-200, very rare. There are not too many more of these flying remaining in the world today. Therefore, you could get a model of one that is still in active service. We'll see for how much longer that these airplanes in particular remain in active service, at least for the foreseeable future. However, be that as it may, it's a unique airplane, and it's a 747, one of the most distinctive liveries you're ever going to see. And you can get it in 1/200 scale as well as 1/400 scale, as we have seen some months ago. So whichever one you want, whether you want the bigger version such as this or you want the smaller version, it's going to be absolutely wonderful. Both of those models in 1/400 and now in 1/200, they received my highest recommendation. I could not possibly like these any more than I already do. This is a tremendous piece. It really, really is. I remember remarking a while ago, back in 2020, when I did my review of the 1/200 scale Concorde, that perhaps I was not going to get any more 1/200 models simply because they're a little bit larger than I would like in terms of being able to store these things. Well, special exception can be made from time to time, and for this airplane and a couple of others, well, I believe it's a worthy exception to make. Be that as it may, though, that's all I have for you today. FerrariMan601 saying thank you all very, very much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.